Council Prime Minister Zechtel stood before the emergency assembly and looked out at the faces of 200 desperate species representatives. The great chamber that had once buzzed with confident superiority now reeked of fear and desperation. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows because the main power grid had failed 3 times in the past week. Ambassador Monica Phillips sat alone in the human observer section. She was the only human still willing to attend council sessions, and she did so purely to watch the spectacle unfold. The species that had voted to restrict human expansion were now begging for any kind of assistance. The crystalline hierarchy's representative rose from his glowing platform. His usual arrogant demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. "The humans must be sanctioned for economic terrorism," he declared. "They have deliberately sabotaged our infrastructure and left us vulnerable to attack." A few delegates nodded in agreement, but most stayed silent. Everyone knew the accusations were false. The humans had not sabotaged anything. They had simply taken their knowledge and skills and gone home. The infrastructure failures were happening because the aliens could not maintain systems they had never truly understood. The Altarian Empire's ambassador stood next. Her silver skin was dull and tarnished from stress. "We demand that Earth be compelled to honor its existing contracts. Our worlds are dying without human technical support. This is a violation of every treaty and agreement we have signed." Monica almost smiled at the irony. These same aliens had spent centuries finding ways to restrict human activities through legal technicalities. Now they wanted to use those same laws to force humans back into service. But Earth's lawyers had been just as careful about following proper procedures during the withdrawal. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster monitored the emergency session from his intelligence post at Alpha Centauri Station. His job was to track alien communications and watch for any military threats against human interests. What he was seeing was not threatening, but it was pathetic. The Council's own infrastructure was collapsing around them. The environmental systems in the Great Chamber kept failing because they had been designed by human architects 2 centuries ago. The life support equipment was breaking down without human maintenance crews. Even the translation systems were glitching because the software had been written by human programmers. Danny watched alien delegates struggling to communicate with each other as their universal translators produced gibberish instead of proper language conversion. Some species were reduced to using primitive hand gestures and crude drawings. The most advanced political body in the galaxy was falling apart because they could not talk to each other properly. Dr. Rachel Newman reviewed the latest intelligence, reports from her office at Earth Medical Command. The health crisis in alien space was becoming catastrophic. Hospitals were shutting down because they could not operate human-designed medical equipment. Pharmaceutical factories had stopped producing medicines because the manufacturing processes required human expertise. The Aquarian Collective's ocean worlds were experiencing massive die-offs of their aquatic population. Their water purification systems had been designed to work in harmony with human-built atmospheric processors. Without proper maintenance, the chemical balance was shifting in ways that made the oceans toxic to native life forms. The Vulcari warrior culture was facing its own medical emergency. Their proud fighting tradition depended on advanced surgical techniques that could repair battle injuries and extend combat effectiveness. But those techniques had been developed by human doctors who understood both alien physiology and cutting-edge medical technology. Rachel had trained half the alien doctors currently practicing in council space. She had written the medical textbooks they used and designed the equipment they depended on. Now those same doctors were sending desperate messages begging her to return and help them save their patients. But Earth's medical resources were being directed toward human needs. New hospitals were being built in expanding human colonies. Research programs were focused on human health challenges. The galaxy's other species would have to learn to take care of themselves. Fleet Admiral Susan Brooks studied military intelligence reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. The robot threat was growing stronger every day while alien defenses continued to collapse. 3 more colonies had gone dark in the outer rim. Automated distress signals suggested mechanical forces were systematically destroying settlements and industrial facilities. The hegemony border that had been stable for a decade was now completely compromised. Alien patrol fleets were grounded by maintenance problems. Sensor networks were failing without human technicians to keep them operational. Warning systems were producing false alarms because the aliens could not properly calibrate human-designed detection equipment. Susan opened a secure communication channel to Admiral Morrison. "Kate, we're looking at a complete breakdown of galactic defenses. The robots are moving in force and the aliens can't mount an effective response. We estimate 6 months before they reach the core worlds." Kate studied the tactical projections on her command screens. The robot invasion 10 years ago had nearly succeeded despite coordinated resistance from all major species. Now the aliens were divided, weakened, and lacking the human leadership that had made victory possible. A new invasion would be a massacre. 3. Council's military posturing had become increasingly desperate and pathetic. The Altarian Empire threatened to send battle fleets to force Earth compliance with old treaties. But their fleets were grounded by mechanical failures, and their navigation systems were producing random course calculations without human operators. The reptilian sovereignty declared that they would seize human colonies to obtain needed technical expertise. But their invasion forces were stuck in orbit around their own worlds, because they could not operate the transport ships properly. Their weapon systems were offline, and their communication networks were producing static instead of coherent signals. Commander Ryan Blake monitored alien military communications from his position aboard the Earth defense ship Horizon. The intercepts revealed chaos and confusion throughout Council military forces. Officers were arguing about basic operational procedures. Supply lines were breaking down because logistics officers could not coordinate complex distribution networks. Even simple patrol missions were failing because navigational computers were producing incorrect data. The most humiliating failures were happening to species that had been most vocal about human limitations. The Zephyrians, who had lectured about primitive human management, were now unable to manage their own atmospheric processors. The crystal beings, who had claimed superior intellect, could not figure out how to operate their own communication systems. Ryan's favorite intercept was a conversation between two Vulcari generals trying to plan a military exercise. They spent 3 hours arguing about how to activate their training simulation computers. The machines had been programmed by human military advisors who had left detailed instruction manuals. But the manuals were written in human languages, and the Vulcari were too proud to admit they needed translation assistance. Dr. Patricia Williams watched news feeds from her laboratory on Luna Station. The footage showed panic spreading through alien populations as their governments proved incapable of solving basic infrastructure problems. Citizens were fleeing major cities as power grids failed and water treatment plants shut down. Refugee camps were forming on agricultural worlds that could still produce food without advanced technology. But the most telling images came from the council chambers themselves. The Great Assembly Hall, where alien representatives had once debated the fate of human expansion, was now using emergency power and portable life support equipment. Delegates wore breathing masks because the air purification system was not working properly. Some species had stopped attending sessions because they could not survive in the deteriorating environmental conditions. Ambassador Chen Wei received increasingly frantic messages from council species offering unprecedented concessions for renewed human cooperation. The Zephyrian Chancellor was willing to grant humans permanent seats on the ruling committee. The Altarian Empire offered to share advanced military technology. The crystalline hierarchies proposed joint research programs with complete equality. But Earth's response remained consistent and professional. The United Earth Federation appreciated their generous offers but was currently focused on domestic development and expansion. Perhaps the council species should work together to solve their mutual challenges, using their own considerable expertise and resources. The suggestion that aliens should cooperate with each other was creating additional chaos. Ancient rivalries were resurging as desperate species competed for scarce resources and technical knowledge. Border skirmishes were breaking out between former allies. Trade wars were erupting over access to the few remaining functional industrial facilities. The galaxy that had once seemed unified under council leadership was fragmenting into hostile camps of frightened species, trying to survive the collapse of their technological civilization. Fleet Admiral Steve Parker stood in the renovated command center on Earth and watched displays that showed humanity's completely transformed position in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the withdrawal began, and the old order had collapsed, so thoroughly that it seemed like ancient history. The holographic maps told the story in simple colors. Red zones showed areas under robot control where mechanical armies had swept through defenseless alien colonies. Yellow zones marked regions where various species were fighting each other for resources and territory. Green zones indicated the growing sphere of human influence as Earth quietly established new relationships with desperate alien governments. Steve had commanded human fleets during the original robot invasion. He understood better than most how dangerous the mechanical enemies were and how much coordination was needed to stop them. The aliens were learning those same lessons, but they were learning them too late and at a terrible cost. Ambassador Laura King found herself in the unusual position of scheduling audiences with representatives from species that had previously refused to acknowledge human diplomatic equality. The waiting room outside her office looked like a who's who of galactic power brokers, all hoping for a few minutes of her time. The Zephyrian Chancellor, who had once lectured about primitive species management, now waited patiently for 3 weeks to get a brief meeting. When he finally sat across from Laura's desk, his purple skin was pale and his confident demeanor had been replaced by desperate humility. "Ambassador King," he began carefully, "my people are facing extinction. Our industrial capacity is gone. Our defense networks have failed. The robots are advancing through our outer colonies and we cannot stop them. We need human assistance and we are willing to pay any price." Laura listened politely and made notes on her tablet. "I appreciate your situation, Chancellor. However, Earth's technical resources are fully committed to our own expansion and defense programs. Perhaps you could request assistance from other council members who surely possess the expertise you need." The Chancellor's breathing holes fluttered with distress. "The other council species are facing the same problems we are. None of us can maintain the systems that humans built for us. We have been fools and we admit it. But surely humanity will not allow the robots to destroy all intelligent life in the galaxy." Laura considered his words carefully. Earth's leadership had been debating this exact question for months. The robot threat was real and growing stronger every day. But helping the aliens would require humans to once again risk their lives for species that had shown nothing but contempt and discrimination. Dr. Gary Hughes led the committee that was establishing new diplomatic protocols for dealing with alien requests. The old system where humans served as junior partners while doing most of the actual work was completely finished. Any species that wanted human assistance now had to meet strict requirements. First, they had to formally acknowledge their previous mistakes and discrimination against humanity. Second, they had to provide concrete guarantees of equal treatment and full partnership in any joint projects. Third, they had to offer something of real value in return for human expertise, not just promises to stop being hostile. The Aquarian Collective had been the first major species to meet these requirements. They had supported human advancement, even when it was politically unpopular, and they were now receiving full human technical assistance in defending their underwater cities. Their ocean worlds were becoming fortress positions that could resist robot invasion. Commander Beth Allen oversaw the gradual establishment of new relationships built on genuine mutual respect. It was slow work because most alien species were still struggling to accept that humans were their equals rather than their servants. But desperation was a powerful teacher, and some were learning faster than others. The small Pteropod Federation had always treated humans fairly, and they were now prospering under full partnership agreements. Human engineers were helping them expand their industrial base while Pteropod biotechnology was advancing human medical research. It was the kind of relationship that should have existed for centuries. Captain Joe Martinez commanded the exploration vessel New Frontier as it surveyed star systems that had been off-limits to human expansion just months ago. The Council's restrictions were meaningless now because the Council itself barely existed as a functioning organization. Joe's ship encountered no opposition as it established new human colonies in previously forbidden territory. The alien patrol fleets that should have challenged their presence were either destroyed by robots or grounded by mechanical failures. Entire sectors of space had become open frontiers for human expansion. But expansion came with risks. The robot armies were advancing through the galaxy, and they would eventually reach human space. Earth's military leaders were already planning defensive strategies and looking for ways to stop the mechanical invasion before it became unstoppable. Admiral Kate Morrison reviewed intelligence reports that showed both opportunities and dangers in the changing galactic situation. The collapse of alien civilization had removed restrictions on human growth, but it had also eliminated the buffer zones that had kept robot forces far from Earth territory. Some alien species were adapting to the new reality better than others. The Aquarians had embraced full partnership with humanity, and their combined fleets were successfully defending key strategic positions. The pteropods had integrated their biotechnology with human engineering to create new defensive systems that showed promise against robot attacks, but others were still clinging to old prejudices even as their worlds burned around them. The Altarian Empire continued to demand that humans serve under alien authority, even though their own government had collapsed into chaos. The crystalline hierarchies insisted that their superior intellect made them natural leaders despite being unable to operate their own communication systems. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster monitored communications intercepts that revealed the final collapse of the old galactic order. The council chambers had been abandoned after life support failures made them uninhabitable. The Zephyrian capital world was under evacuation as robot forces approached the system. Even the mighty Vulcari had been reduced to scattered refugee fleets searching for safe harbor. But the most significant development was the growing recognition among many alien species that their survival depended on human cooperation. Former enemies were putting aside ancient grudges to work with human advisors. Traditional rivals were sharing resources under human coordination. The galaxy was being restructured around human leadership, whether Earth wanted that responsibility or not. Dr. Elena Rodriguez supervised the construction of new research facilities as human science experienced a golden age of discovery and innovation. Without the need to share every breakthrough with ungrateful alien partners, human scientists were making rapid advances in technology, medicine, and space exploration. The quantum drive systems that had been restricted from human use were now being improved and refined in Earth laboratories. The medical nanobots that had saved alien lives were being enhanced for human physiology. The communication networks that had connected the galaxy were being rebuilt with human needs as the primary concern. But Elena knew that Earth could not remain isolated forever. The robot threat was too large for any single species to handle alone. Eventually, humans would have to choose between helping their former oppressors or watching the galaxy fall to mechanical conquest. Captain Sandra Lee commanded rescue fleets that evacuated human civilians from danger zones where robot forces were advancing. Her ships also carried alien refugees who had abandoned their prejudices in favor of survival. These mixed crews were becoming the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. The transformation was not complete, and it was not without problems. Many humans still harbored resentment about centuries of discrimination and second-class treatment. Many aliens still struggled to accept that their technological superiority had been an illusion built on human competence. But necessity was forcing change on everyone. Robot armies did not care about species politics or ancient grudges. They destroyed biological life without regard for civilization, culture, or individual achievement. Facing extinction, the survivors were learning to work together in ways that had never been possible under the old council system. Fleet Admiral Steve Parker looked at his strategic displays and saw the future taking shape. Red zones where robot forces controlled dead worlds. Yellow zones where various species fought desperately for survival. Green zones where human leadership was creating new alliances and building effective resistance. The silent exit that had shattered the council was becoming something much larger and more important. It was the birth of a new galactic civilization, with humanity at its center. Not as servants or junior partners, but as the acknowledged leaders of intelligent species working together for mutual survival and prosperity. The species that had tried to restrict human expansion had guaranteed human dominance through their own short-sighted discrimination. The galaxy they had wanted to control was being rebuilt according to human values and human vision. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the command center deep inside Earth Defense Headquarters and studied the intelligence reports flowing across her screens. 3 months had passed since the last human had left Council space. The galaxy was falling, apart faster than anyone had expected. The holographic display showed economic data from 200 alien worlds. Red warning indicators flashed everywhere. Industrial production was down 60%. Food distribution had collapsed in 12 major systems. Transportation networks were failing as maintenance crews struggled with human-designed equipment. They could not understand. Kate had spent 40 years in the military. She had fought in 3 major wars and dozens of smaller conflicts. But she had never seen destruction on this scale, and it had been accomplished without firing a single shot. The aliens had done this to themselves, by driving away the people who kept their civilization running. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, the massive factories that had produced electronics for half the galaxy stood silent and cold. The alien supervisors had tried everything to restart the automated production lines. They brought in their best engineers and their smartest computer specialists. But every attempt ended in failure. The problem was not just technical knowledge. The humans had designed their systems to work together in complex ways that took decades to fully understand. A power regulation system connected to a quality control network that linked to a raw material processor that fed back into the environmental controls. Remove the humans who understood these connections and everything stopped working. Dr. Alex Carter read the reports from his office at the Earth Science Institute. He had been the chief scientific liaison to the Council for 20 years. He knew every major research facility in alien space, and he had helped design most of them. Now those same facilities were shutting down one by one as critical systems failed without human maintenance. The crystalline hierarchies had boasted about their advanced technology for centuries. Their quantum communication arrays could send messages instantly across the galaxy. But those arrays depended on relay stations that had been built and maintained by human engineers. As the relays went offline, the crystal beings found themselves cut off from their own colonies. Alex pulled up a status map of the Galactic Communication Network. 3 months ago, it had been a beautiful web of green lines connecting every major world. Now it looked like someone had taken scissors to it. Whole sectors were dark. Important trade routes had no communication coverage. Even the council chambers on the capital world could barely talk to their own member species. Fleet Admiral Susan Brooks reviewed the military situation from her headquarters on Mars. The data was even more dramatic than the economic reports. Alien fleets that had seemed powerful just months ago were now struggling to maintain basic operations. The hegemony border had been the most dangerous region in known space. Robot armies from an unknown dimension had tried to invade the galaxy 10 years ago. Only constant patrols by combined alien and human forces had kept them at bay. But now the patrol schedules were falling apart. The Altarian Empire had lost contact with half its border stations. The Vulcari warrior fleets were grounded by mechanical failures. The insectoid swarm's hive ships could not navigate properly without human-designed sensor systems. The robots were still out there somewhere, and the galaxy's defenses were crumbling. Susan opened a communication channel to Admiral Morrison. Kate, we're getting reports of increased robot activity in the Outer Rim. 3 alien colonies have gone dark in the past week. Kate nodded grimly. I've seen the intelligence. The robots are testing the defenses. They know something has changed. The 2 admirals had been friends since their days at the Academy. They had fought side by side against the robot invasion. They knew better than anyone how dangerous the situation was becoming. On Altair 6, food riots had broken out in the capital city. The planet's 20 billion inhabitants depended on a complex distribution system that brought supplies from agricultural worlds throughout the sector. That system had been designed and operated by human logistics experts who understood how to move massive quantities of cargo across interstellar distances. Captain Mike Johnson had run the Altair Food Distribution Center for 12 years. He knew every trade route, every cargo ship captain, and every storage facility in the system. When he left, he took that knowledge with him. The aliens were left with warehouses full of spoiled food and transportation networks they could not coordinate. The Altarian government declared martial law and sent their military to take control of the distribution centers. But the soldiers were just as confused as the civilian administrators. The computer systems were locked with passwords only Mike had known. The routing algorithms were written in human computer languages. Even the maintenance manuals were in human script. Similar disasters were unfolding across the galaxy. The Draconian Republic's mining operations had ground to a halt when their human-designed extraction equipment broke down. The Aquarian Collective's underwater cities were experiencing life support failures as their environmental systems aged without proper maintenance. The Reptilian Sovereignty's weapons factories could not produce ammunition because the manufacturing processes required human expertise. Dr. Gary Hughes monitored the situation from Earth's diplomatic headquarters. As the Director of Alien Relations, his job was to handle the flood of desperate requests for help that arrived every day. The messages came from government leaders, business executives, military commanders, and ordinary citizens who were watching their worlds fall apart. The tone of the messages had changed dramatically over the past few months. In the beginning, the aliens had been angry and demanding. They accused humans of sabotage, terrorism, and treaty violations. They threatened legal action and economic sanctions. But as the crisis deepened, anger had turned to desperation. The messages now came with offers of money, territory, and political concessions. The Zephyrian Chancellor, who had led the vote to restrict humans, was now offering to make Earth a full member of the Council's ruling committee. Gary read each message carefully and responded with the same polite but firm reply. Earth appreciated their interest but was not available to provide technical assistance to Council species at this time. Perhaps they should consult with their fellow Council members who surely possessed the necessary expertise. The suggestion that aliens should help each other was causing additional problems. The different species had spent centuries competing for resources, territory, and influence. They had relied on human mediators to resolve their disputes and human expertise to solve their technical challenges. Without humans to bridge the gaps between them, old rivalries were resurging. Commander. Beth Allen studied intelligence reports about growing tensions between alien races. The Altarian Empire and the Draconian Republic were disputing mining rights in a system that had been peaceful for 50 years. The crystalline hierarchies and the insectoid swarm were building up military forces along their shared border. The Vulcari were raiding supply convoys from species they considered weak. Beth had served as a military attaché to several alien governments. She understood their cultures and their psychology. The current crisis was not just about technology or economics, it was about pride and fear. The aliens were discovering that their advanced civilizations had been built on human foundations, and they were terrified of what that meant. Captain Joe Martinez commanded a deep space monitoring station on the edge of Earth territory. His job was to watch for any signs of alien military activity that might threaten human interests. So far, the aliens had been too busy with their own problems to cause trouble for Earth. But Joe's sensors were picking up disturbing signs from the outer rim, automated distress signals from colonies that had suddenly gone silent, unexplained energy signatures that matched robot technology, navigation beacons that had been destroyed by unknown forces. The robot threat that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 10 years ago was stirring again. The machines were testing the weakened defenses and finding gaps everywhere. Without human leadership and coordination, the alien military forces were no match for the mechanical invaders. Joe opened a secure channel to Earth Defense Command. Admiral Morrison, we have a problem. The robots are moving again, and the aliens can't stop them. We may be looking at another invasion. Kate received the message and felt a chill run down her spine. The humans had withdrawn from Council space to escape discrimination and find independence, but they might have accidentally triggered a crisis that could destroy all intelligent life in the galaxy. The question now was whether humanity would choose to save the species that had rejected them, or let the galaxy burn while Earth remained safely behind its borders. It was a decision that would define the future of galactic civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez pressed her face against the observation window of Luna Station and watched the last human transport ship leave Centauri Prime. The sleek vessel carried 3,000 people who had lived and worked on the alien world for 30 years. Now they were coming home with everything they could carry. Elena had been coordinating the withdrawal from her position at Earth's largest space station. For 2 months, she had watched an endless stream of ships arrive from every corner of Council space. Each one brought more people, more equipment, and more stories of confused aliens asking why the humans were leaving. Commander Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Horizon and checked his status reports. His job was to make sure every human got out safely, and every piece of Earth technology came with them. It was the biggest moving operation in galactic history, and it was working perfectly. "How many more ships?" Ryan asked his communications officer. 47 vessels still in transit, Lieutenant Mary Collins replied. The last group should arrive from the Outer Rim colonies in 6 days. Ryan nodded and looked at his tactical display. Green dots showed human ships moving through space toward Earth territory. Red dots showed the places they had left behind. Soon all the green dots would be on the human side of the border, and the red dots would be empty. The withdrawal had surprised everyone, including most humans. For months before the final council vote, Earth's government had been making secret preparations. Ships had been moved into position. Personnel had been quietly briefed. Supply chains had been rerouted. When Ambassador Monroe gave the signal, everything happened at once. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, human workers had simply stopped showing up for their shifts. The massive automated factories that produced electronics for half the galaxy sat silent and dark. The alien supervisors wandered around empty control rooms trying to figure out how to restart the machines, but all the instruction manuals were written in human languages, and all the passwords had been changed. Dr. Patricia Williams had run the quantum physics lab on Altair Prime for 15 years. She knew every piece of equipment and every research project. When she left, she took all her notes, all her data files, and all her security codes. She also took her team of 30 human scientists who had been working on breakthrough technologies for the Altarian Empire. The aliens tried to stop them at the spaceport. The Altarian security chief demanded that Patricia leave her research behind. He said it belonged to the Empire since they had funded the lab. Patricia smiled and handed him a legal document. According to galactic patent law, all intellectual property belongs to the species that created it, she said. This research was done by human minds using human methods. You funded it, but you do not own it. The security chief read the document twice but could not find any way around it. The law was clear, and humans had always been careful to follow every rule exactly. Patricia and her team walked onto their transport ship with boxes full of research that represented decades of scientific progress. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Human doctors closed their hospitals and took their medical equipment with them. Human engineers shut down power plants and removed their control systems. Human farmers harvested their crops one last time and destroyed the seeds so no one else could plant them. The economic impact hit within days. Trade routes that had operated for decades suddenly had no ships to carry cargo. The Draconian Republic discovered that 80% of their interstellar commerce depended on human-operated vessels. When those ships vanished, their economy began to collapse. Ambassador Chen Wei was one of the few humans still talking to Council species. His job was to handle the flood of desperate messages coming from alien governments. Every day brought new requests for help, new offers of money, and new threats of legal action. The Aquarian Collective's trade minister offered to double human salaries if they would keep running the shipping networks. Chen listened politely and then explained that Earth was no longer interested in employment contracts with Council species. The Vulcari had been some of the loudest voices demanding restrictions on human expansion. Now their proud warrior culture was reduced to begging for technical support. Their main battle fleet was grounded because they could not maintain the human-designed engines. Their planet's defense grid had shut down when the human operators left. Chen received a personal message from the Vulcari war leader, asking for emergency assistance. The message was humble and desperate. Chen replied with a standard form letter suggesting they contact other Council species for help. But the other Council species had their own problems. The crystalline hierarchies were facing massive system failures across their communication networks. The quantum relays that connected their worlds had been built and maintained by human technicians. Without them, the crystal beings could barely talk to each other. Captain Sandra Lee commanded a salvage fleet that was collecting human property from abandoned installations. Her ships moved from world to world, gathering up everything from mining equipment to coffee machines. The aliens watched in confusion as humans loaded their possessions and left behind empty buildings. On Zephyria Prime, the Chancellor's own palace experienced a complete environmental system breakdown. The air purification unit stopped working. The temperature controls went haywire. The water recyclers began producing undrinkable sludge. It turned out that every critical system had been designed, installed, and maintained by human engineers. The Chancellor called an emergency meeting with his advisors. They sat in the sweltering heat of the broken palace and tried to figure out what to do. None of them knew how the life support systems worked. None of them could read the technical manuals that were written in human script. "Can we hire new human technicians?" one advisor asked. "The humans refuse all job offers," another replied. "They say they are not available for work in council space." The Chancellor wiped sweat from his purple skin and cursed the day he had voted to restrict human expansion. But it was too late for regrets now. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster monitored communications from his post at Alpha Centauri Defense Station. His job was to track alien military movements and watch for any threats against human interests. So far, the aliens had been too busy dealing with their own crises to cause trouble. The reports coming in were almost funny. The mighty Altarian battle fleet had lost half its ships to mechanical failures. The insectoid swarm's invasion force was stuck in orbit around their homeworld because they could not navigate without human-built sensor systems. The reptilian sovereignty's army was out of ammunition because their weapons factories had been operated by human workers. Some alien governments tried to hire human contractors at enormous prices. Earth's response was always the same. All human technical personnel were needed for domestic projects. Perhaps the aliens should develop their own expertise or ask their council partners for assistance. The suggestion that council species should help each other created even more problems. The different alien races had competed with each other for centuries. They trusted human mediators to be fair and neutral, but they did not trust each other at all. Dr. Rachel Newman watched news feeds from her office at Earth Defense Command. The footage showed chaos spreading across alien worlds. Food riots on Altair 6 where the distribution system had collapsed. Power blackouts on draconian colonies where the energy grid was failing. Medical emergencies on crystal worlds where the hospitals could not function without human-designed equipment. But Earth remained calm and peaceful. Human colonies were expanding into previously forbidden territory. Human ships were exploring new star systems. Human scientists were making breakthrough discoveries in their own laboratories. Life was good when you did not have to waste time arguing with ungrateful aliens. The withdrawal was almost complete. In just 2 more weeks, every human would be back in Earth space. They would take with them 3 centuries of knowledge, experience, and technology. Behind them, they would leave a galaxy that was about to discover just how much it had depended on the species it had tried to suppress. Lisa Monroe sat in the cold metal chair and watched the alien creatures argue about her people. The huge chamber filled with noise as 200 different species shouted at each other in their strange languages. Some looked like giant insects, with clicking sounds. Others had scales and hissed when they spoke. A few glowed with soft blue light that hurt her eyes. But they all had one thing in common. They all thought humans were stupid and weak. The Zephyrian Chancellor stood up from his floating platform. His long purple arms waved in the air as he spoke in his deep voice. His words came through the translation device in Lisa's ear. "The primitive humans have caused enough problems," he said. "We must stop them from spreading to more worlds. They are too young and too dangerous." Lisa kept her face calm, but her hands made tight fists under the table. She had been Earth's top diplomat for 20 years. She had seen this same meeting happen over and over again. The aliens would talk about humans like they were children who could not take care of themselves. They would make rules that hurt human colonies. Then they would act surprised when humans got angry. Captain Jake Sullivan watched from the gallery, above. He wore his clean blue uniform with all his medals from the Hegemony Wars. Those wars had been 10 years ago when the robot armies tried to destroy all life in the galaxy. Jake had led human ships in the biggest space battles anyone had ever seen. He had saved 3 alien worlds from total destruction. But now these same aliens wanted to limit where humans could live. Jake looked down at Lisa and saw her jaw get tight. He knew that look. She was done playing games with these creatures. The Altarian ambassador spoke next. She was tall and thin with silver skin that reflected the chamber lights. "The motion before us is simple," she said. "We must vote to restrict human expansion to their current territory. No new colonies, no new trade routes, no new military bases. The humans have shown they cannot be trusted with freedom." A few alien voices made sounds of agreement. The insect-like draconians clicked their approval. The crystal beings from the outer rim glowed brighter, but some others stayed quiet. The Aquarians had worked with humans for 50 years. They knew humans were good partners. Lisa stood up slowly. The chamber got quiet as all eyes turned to her. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, but she had something they did not. She had dignity. "Honorable delegates," she began. Her voice was clear and strong. "Humanity has served this council for 300 years. We have given our technology freely. We have shared our medical knowledge. We have fought beside you in wars. We have died for species we had never met before." The Chancellor made a dismissive sound with his breathing holes. "Yes, yes, we know what humans have done. The question is what humans will do if we give them more power." Lisa looked around the chamber. She saw faces that showed boredom, anger, and fear. But she did not see respect. She had not seen real respect in decades. "We built the quantum communication network that connects your worlds," she continued. "We designed the life support systems on half your space stations. We created the medical nanobots that saved billions of your people from the plague 10 years ago. We did all this because we believed in partnership." Some aliens shifted in their seats. A few looked uncomfortable, but most just waited for her to finish so they could vote. The vote came quickly. 847 delegates voted yes to restrict humans. Only 3 voted no. The Aquarians, the small Pteropod Federation, and 1 independent world, called Haven. Lisa watched the numbers appear on the big screen. She had expected this, but it still felt like a punch to the stomach. 3 centuries of friendship and cooperation meant nothing to these creatures. She packed her papers into her briefcase. The other human diplomats did the same. Their movements were slow and careful. They had talked about this moment many times in private meetings. They all knew what would happen next. Lisa stood and faced the chamber one last time. The aliens were already talking about other business. They thought the human problem was solved. "The United Earth Federation thanks this council for the lessons learned during our association," she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the huge room. "We wish you well in your future endeavors." The words sounded polite and normal, but Jake Sullivan felt a chill run down his back. He had heard Lisa practice that speech in her office. He knew what it really meant. Lisa walked toward the exit. Her team followed behind her. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. A few alien delegates looked puzzled. The Aquarian ambassador had a worried expression on her face. As they reached the door, Lisa turned back once more. She looked at the Chancellor, who was already reading from another document. She looked at the Altarian ambassador, who was talking to her aide. None of them understood what had just happened. "Good luck," Lisa said quietly. Then she walked out. Jake followed the diplomatic team out of the chamber. In the hallway outside, he saw other humans leaving their posts. Security guards from Earth Defense were packing their equipment. Scientists from the Joint Research Division were closing down their labs. Even the maintenance crews were shutting off systems they had built and operated for decades. Lisa stopped at a communication terminal and entered her personal code. A message window opened showing her connection to Earth Command. "Operation Exodus is authorized," she said into the microphone. Begin immediate withdrawal of all personnel and assets from Council space. Leave nothing behind that they cannot replace themselves. The response came back in seconds. Confirmed, Ambassador. All ships are standing by. Estimated completion time is 60 days. Jake walked beside Lisa as they headed to the human transport dock. Do you think they understand what just happened? He asked. Lisa smiled for the first time in months. They will. Behind them, the council continued its session. They were already debating new trade regulations. None of them noticed that the human translator stations had gone dark. None of them saw that the communication links to Earth had been quietly severed. They would notice soon enough. In the next few days, they would discover that the humans had meant exactly what they said. The association was over. The partnership was finished. And the species they had treated as junior members were taking their toys and going home. The real lesson was about to begin.